guys can you guys, David and Michelle, want to unmute and introduce yourselves?
Hi, we're David and Michelle.
Well, I'm Michelle.
I'm David. We moved to New Hampshire from California in May of this year.
And we're California natives, so it was a big change.
Anything else?
I think that's good. And then it looks like our other panelist has joined us. And so Jackie just read a name, sorry. Jody, do you want to introduce yourself? And then it looks like Tom stepped away for a second. He's here.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jody. You can all see my name, I suppose. I moved to New Hampshire for the Free State Project back in 2007. Our last stop was right outside of Philadelphia, PA. I'm originally from Brooklyn. I've lived in California. I've lived in Israel. I've lived in Tennessee. Been around, been in cities and rural and suburbs. And this was my first rural area, and I absolutely love it. Best move I ever made. Is that enough?
And yeah, and Tom.
And I'm Tom Nash. I moved 7 years ago with my wife, Anna. We are also from Brooklyn. What are the odds?
Bensonhurst, actually. Anna and I are from the same part of Brooklyn.
Yep, me too. I've lived in like 10 different parts of Brooklyn, but most recently Bensonhurst. But yes, also the best move we've ever made because New York City is trash. And Exeter is lovely. New Hampshire in general is. And now we own a chocolate shop, which I'm currently in.
And you run it. Yeah.
And one of the reasons we invited Tom to be on the panel is because we get lots of questions about what it's like to run a business in New Hampshire. So if anyone has any specific business questions, we have Tom. Jody has probably, even though I'm a mom of 4, Jody has the most education in New Hampshire experience to share. So we get lots of questions about that. And although David and Michelle haven't spent a winter yet, we definitely get lots of questions about the move, and being from California, it's a big switch. So let's get started with our, what is the weather like? Oh, and I guess we're not talking about that one because I somehow haven't figured out slides yet. Back to the weather. I need a meteorologist. What do you guys, there has been so many good answers about this. Who wants to give the summary? Jody.
I want to jump in. The thing about the weather is, with the proper respect of it, it is completely livable, even if you don't love it. I grew up in New York where we had snow every year and it was cold every year, and I was in denial every year. I never dressed for it. I didn't have the right gloves or the shoes or the hats. I hated wearing hats. But here, you got to do it. And then it's fine outside. I remember my first year, 15-degree weather, we were moving wood outside and we had to actually take our outer layers off. We were warm. It's really possible to be comfortable in the cold. So that's my one piece of it.
Yeah, I agree. But I also moved from Alaska, so it's too warm here. And I would like to take July humidity and send it to the south where they complain about it being too cold here. So I know that my perspective is very skewed. So
The only thing we can add is everywhere other than Southern California is wetter than Southern California. So it was a little bit of an adjustment, but we knew what we were getting into and we just embraced it and enjoyed it. I think the summer was very wet from what I heard.
It was very wet. not normal, but it's never normal. Let me add that about the weather. I mean, we don't just have to talk about winter weather, right? They always ask, what are the winters like? And every year it's different. My first year here, we got literally 12 feet of snow, not in one fell swoop, but like a foot a week for the entire year. We learned how to plow that year, and we maintain our own road. We live on a class 6 road. Town doesn't maintain it. And, you know, we spent a lot of time outside, and we did maple sugaring in 12 feet of snow at the end of the season, although it got shorter and shorter, the snow, that is. One of the beautiful things about winter, so what was shocking to me the first year was once it gets to a certain point in the year and there's snow on the ground and it doesn't get above freezing, the snow stays on the ground. And you know, you think about the cities and how ugly that gets, like, oh my God, do you really want it staying on the ground? But I have to tell you, it's the most beautiful thing on the fields where I live. I mean, I live rural. When there's a full moon and it just reflects against this snow just all over the land. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful things. So I recommend getting out into the rural areas to see that during the winter.
And how do you have snowball fights without snow? Yeah, I moved from Alaska, but it was a switch the first winter because in Alaska they expect snow. People drive trucks, people have places to put snow. And I got here right as the record-breaking snow year of 2014. And I live in Manchester in an apartment. So there was no room for snow. And so it was definitely an adjustment. But since then, there's not been any winters even near that. I don't think I paid anyone for snow plowing last year, and I own 2 multifamilies in Manchester. So every year is different. I agree with that. How about you, Tom? Have anything to add? I know the weather is.
I wouldn't say New York is terribly different as far as the weather goes. My second or third year here, there was more snowfall in New York City than there was in New Hampshire. The last 2 years were kind of mild, and I think they're saying this year is supposed to be mild as well, depending on where you're reading. But I hate the cold, and I don't enjoy plowing, and probably I will not be like retiring in a cold climate. However, it is not the tundra or anything like Alaska that you get like in the comments on Facebook. It's like, oh, I can't move to New Hampshire. It's freezing there. There's no life. It is not horrible, and it is very rarely to the point where there is no life outside or things happening outside.
I have something very important to add to this. So people are afraid of the snow, but the fact is, New Hampshire plows the roads better than any place I've lived where it snows. The day after a huge storm, you can go practically anywhere in the state on the major roads. I mean, the back roads might take a couple more days, but still, they're on top of it. They're salting and plowing the whole time during a storm. So it's nothing like anywhere else you've ever lived.
Depending on when the snow falls, it is taken care of fairly quickly, depending on where you live here. And we only closed our shop, I think, early twice since, because of the snow, because of the roads. And it's just because it started in the later afternoon when, it was going to be a commuting time for our employees. But otherwise, it doesn't shut down, much activity. And people generally know how to drive on the snow up here.
Yeah, I would say the thing that if you're not familiar with, that is way more important to learn about than snow is ice.
Yeah.
Don't even attempt if it's freezing ice. Don't leave your house. Like there isn't a snow tire made that can prevent you from sliding off the road when it's freezing ice.
Go get your bread and milk.
Say that again.
Say that again.
I said, go get your bread beforehand.
Yeah. So that's but I think the one thing that we always see also with this question is the benefits of living in New Hampshire and what we're doing here outweigh the conveniences or the annoyance of being in a northern climate. And I would definitely encourage, if you joined a webinar to find out more about New Hampshire, that maybe the weather isn't going to be enough to deter you when you hear the other things that we have going on here. And Amy said that there was some questions. Is it related to weather, or is it or things that we should keep going and come back to?
You can come back to it.
Okay. All right. So I have you guys' faces covering my slides now because I like to see who's here. So I'm going to minimize you for a second. How could I move from another country? So before we get into this one, is this something that you could shoot Amy a text if we should spend a lot of time? Because this is one that I did not get a panelist on, but I do have some resources that I can email to you from folks who have moved from other countries. It's definitely not an easy thing to do, and I don't want to spend a lot of time with it if it's not applicable to our audience. Nah,
Can I add one
Steve.
thing?
Go ahead, Tom.
I don't want to name anybody's name because I don't know if they want that information, but the only experience I have with that is that there is a Free Stater who lives here now and has lived here for many years, who we helped get asylum from Russia. So there are countries where if you get a good enough lawyer here in the United States and you can establish some residence here, we were just using a friend's mailing address, you can get that asylum. I don't know, what countries are on that list these days, but if you are being oppressed politically, and this person was, he was able to get a good lawyer, and after about a year, I think, or so, he was able to establish residence here and stay.
It took him a long time to actually get that full approval, but
get the approval, yeah, but
yeah. But he was here the whole time.
Get a lawyer in New York City that was able to help him. So get a lawyer.
Yeah, and the student and working visas and different things are still available, but we're going to move on because that doesn't seem to be what we need to focus on tonight. And property taxes seem really high. What areas have the lowest property tax? So, panelists?
So, and I'll jump in. So first of all, there's a lot of things to know here. First of all, there's so many other taxes that you don't have in this state. The fact that property taxes seem high, first of all, it depends on where you come from. Some people think it's really cheap, which I find hysterical. But so understanding that the entire, set of taxes that you pay is lower here. Property taxes mostly pay for schools. And that's what keeps them high. But it is town-based. Like, you have to look at all the towns to see which ones are low. And I break them into 3 areas, and they do it per $1,000 of valuation of your property. And so there are those that are under 20, there's those between 20 and 30, and there's those above 30 per 1,000. And that's how I think about it. You will find areas, so like where I live in the Upper Valley, and I live in Croydon. Croydon is in the under 20 area, and if we can help it, we're always going to stay there. Our town is very frugal, and we figure out ways to do it. But all our neighboring towns are at least in that middle range. And Constance, you can probably speak to some of this just from the real estate perspective, right? Like, then there's wealthy towns that have lower taxes. So like, we're just rural and cheap, right, in my town. But you go to Sunapee or Hanover or what is it in the lake? Well, there's a lot of ones in the lakes, but where you have a lot. Say again.
Alton, is that the one you're thinking of?
It's not the one I was thinking of, but that's okay. Where Seamus lives, Scally. I shouldn't say names, right? I'm just blanking.
There's more than one of that name. It's fine.
There, I said his last name, but at any rate, where there's wealthy people there, your tax rate's going to be lower. So you still, just because of the valuation of their properties, they pay the vast majority in this fair taxing system. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I have to say about it, I think.
And David and Michelle, how do your taxes compare? Since you're our most recent movers on the panel. So you've
Where do you
purchased
live?
We live in Concord.
We live in Concord. So we actually took higher tax base here in New Hampshire, but we have like the perfect property. We have 4 acres that's in the middle of a 1,000-acre conservancy. We're literally in the middle of the conservancy. We're one of 3 houses in the conservancy. So we have basically a 1,000-acre forest
With hiking trails.
with hiking trails maintained by the city, by those taxes we're paying. And yet we're 10 minutes from downtown. And since both of us grew up in the city in California, we got like this perfect combination. So we're paying a little more taxes than when we first looked, we thought we would. And it's about 50% higher than what we had in California.
Yeah.
Which, California has high taxes already. We were paying high property tax and a high sales tax and a high income tax. And by the time you take all those taxes into consideration, we're paying less tax here in New Hampshire, for sure, even at the higher tax rate. I don't know what else to say about it.
I think it's a consideration when you go and look at the areas to move into New Hampshire. Find the area you want to live in, and then just make sure that the taxes are within what you expect.
I did see a site that had, sort of some analysis from 2019 that was available. I was easily found from a Google search. That there are some ways to find out what taxes are kind of like, but you still have to do your research. As any real estate person will tell you, look at what's actually happening. Jody?
Doesn't Porcupine Real Estate have resources to show you all the tax rates of the different towns? Okay. That's what
I was
you should look at.
gonna jump in and say some things, but I also wanted to give the panelists the personal experience, because I have the real estate experience. The one thing that I do frequently is I set up an auto search for potential buyers, and I can put the maximum amount of annual tax you want to pay, because your pre-approval letter, if you're purchasing with financing in New Hampshire, will have a max amount you can spend on taxes, because our tax rates vary so much from town to town. So moving from a place like Alaska, which has really low property taxes, I never noticed needing to worry about property taxes when house hunting. It was always just based on the total. But when you can have a $500,000 house in New Hampshire that has $6,000 a year property tax, and also has in another town, one town over, has $15,000 a year property tax, you have to pay attention to that. It affects your ratios and your amount of for your mortgage payment. So that's something that we do. And also on the Porcupine Real Estate site, we have a link as a resource to the towns that have lower taxes. But tax rates aren't everything, because then there's also the assessed value. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier about the assessed value in New Hampshire. It's different. It doesn't immediately reassess after the purchase. Properties are assessed every 5 years. And then the tax rate per town is actually adjusted. So my tax assessment from buying in 2018 to now has gone up over 200,000, but the tax rate for Manchester is supposed to go down to under 20 per mil for the next budget. So we'll see where they actually end up. Obviously, having lots of people like Jody in her town, they're pushing to keep the budget in check is important, and so that's why we're here.
We don't have a lot of people, though. I just want to throw that out. My town has
Okay.
only 700 people total. That includes children.
Well, but you have people in your town who want to keep the budget. Yeah, that's what I meant by
It was just a joke.
Okay.
I was just being funny.
I have that on this block, I think. Maybe not 700, but all right. Anybody else do we want to break to see if there's any questions? Go ahead, Tom.
Our tax rate just went down 2%, but just like you said, the assessments are through the roof because of current values. So it won't feel like a decrease, but it's nice to know that they can even go down, because I was surprised that in Exeter, where they love taxes and raising money, that there was a decrease in the tax rate. So it's possible. Now we just need the market to crash, and then, you know, we'll be paying a lot less in taxes.
So should I send all the articles that I've been collecting about why this isn't like 2008 and that the market's not going to crash soon?
Nope, I need it to go down a little because we might be buying another house.
So I if you guys have your cameras on and can see me, I will do the graphic that the gesture that I've been doing for people. So this is 2021, and this is what it's going to be from the projections. So it's going to slow down or cool off in that instead of going almost straight up at 20%, actually I think New Hampshire on average, the values increased 21% last year over 2020. So now it's nationally it's projected to go back down to 5% increased value per year. So it's cooling, as in growth is slowing, not crashing.
Yeah.
I have this conversation frequently. You probably can tell. So, all right. Any questions, Amy, regarding topics that we've covered or anything that we should know?
No, we can save them for the end.
Okay. All right. This is a great one for Jody. I want to build a chicken coop, build a barn, have a tiny house. What areas have the least zoning restrictions?
So there are some towns that have no zoning whatsoever, although there are still state zoning laws, right, for septic, I believe is the only thing that the state demands. And so, like, you know, in my area, you got Grafton, you got Canaan. But then Croydon, the town that I live in, has really minimal zoning regulations. And I know somebody on the select board, they're just working on just reducing it even more. I mean, we'll see. We're hoping. Select board and the planning board, as it turns out. We have a lot of free staters in town. We're really starting to make a difference. And I don't know where these other ones are. And again, it's on a town by town basis. And so Porcupine Real Estate points you to the zoning free towns, but they often forget about those minimal towns, the minimum zoning towns. So look at those two, because we found that we can do just about anything we want. We have chicken coops, we have barns, we even had a tiny house on our property for the last year, somebody working on the farm, and that's where they lived. You know, there's some regulation that says you can't have two, boy, you know what? I don't even know. I think you couldn't have more than two families living on the same property, and then there was like a second building problem, but like, I don't know. We have 210 acres. So we could just build in the woods. Who's even going out there? Did I say that? We're being recorded, aren't we?
I mean, you wouldn't, I'm sure, but you could.
Exactly my point. Yes.
Yeah, that I don't think we have a resource to lower zoning. Do we, Amy, on the website?
We do have links to towns zoning ordinances on nhrelocationguide.com.
Okay, so make it easier, but there are too many.
Yeah, we can't keep track of all of it, right?
And it's so interesting that you can go one town over and have such a completely different feel, like Henniker to Ware, for example. because Henniker is a college town. It has a very, very different feel than Ware, which actually is a place that a lot of Free Staters have moved to. And they're just right next to each other.
Right, and any rural town, oh, excuse me, any rural town will have more flexibility, like, especially if you start homesteading, you need outbuildings. I mean, what's going to happen is you're going to get taxed on them, and so then you have to learn what the tax structure is. Even a lean-to built on the side of a house gets taxed. It's really fascinating. That's more the issue for us than whether we're allowed or not, as having a farm, whatever.
And I don't think anybody else here on the panel has probably had to, I mean, Tom, your question, you're going to be more specific to like starting businesses. And
we haven't started our building project yet, so I don't know what it's like here.
Well, you're in Concord. So what I can tell you in Croydon is we don't have to get a building inspector. We don't have to do anything like that. We can build to code. We can, do whatever we can do whatever we want, basically.
We did have to have an inspector for the air conditioning for electric. Which is okay with me.
For people that are self-building, if you do ever want to sell and sell with a mortgage, there is definitely keeping close to codes and things that look normal versus extremely unusual will make an easier resale. But a lot of people that are planning on living there, it's not something that they're thinking that they're going to sell down the road. You're building your chicken coops and your location you plan on being self-sufficient, then I wouldn't worry too much about building to code. This is also very similar from Alaska. We had similar very homesteady properties there. So, I have to minimize.
Constance,
Yeah,
before you proceed, can I ask some questions from the chat?
definitely.
So just a reminder that we are recording. So do different towns have different regulations on Second Amendment activities like minimum lot size and noise ordinances?
I need my husband for this. Ian. Yeah. Come here. Get my headset out. Amy, can you ask that question again so Ian can hear it?
Yes. So do different towns have different regulations on Second Amendment activities like minimum lot size or noise ordinance?
On just shooting, they do have individual ordinances that have noise things. There's usually a like our noise ordinances say that you have to be, whatever you're shooting at has to be more than like 300 feet away from any occupied structure. As far as noise goes, I think some towns will have ordinances that say like you can only shoot rimfires at night, or you can't shoot anything at night. But yeah, that's a local thing.
It's strictly town level.
It's town level, yeah.
Nothing at the state level.
I can tell an anecdotal story about this. I had folks who were buying on a 3-acre lot in a small town, like small town, so it was like close to the 2 roads that would be considered their downtown, despite the fact that a downtown didn't really exist. So in the dense part of the town, on 3 acres, and we put in the contract that they were gonna look into land use as one of their due diligence. So during the home inspection, they had the chief of police come to the land, look at the layout, and confirm that they could shoot in their backyard, even though there was a neighbor immediately to either side. And it was actually a really good experience. He was like, oh, we're so excited to have you. She's 90 and deaf anyway. You're not going to bother her. Just be polite and welcome to town. So that's not your typical, move to any state type of story. That's pretty
Right.
typical news.
Yeah, that's a nice story. It's good that it happened. Not all towns are like that. Peterborough wouldn't be like that, for example. There is a grandfathering aspect to this too. And I think in most places, if you were to move on to buy a property that already had a shooting range set up, you could keep it for sure. Because I know that's the thing where people who have set up a shooting range and then they have neighbors who move close and want to say, you shouldn't be allowed to shoot there. It's like, I was here first. And there's at least one major gun club, rod and rifle club or whatever, that's situated in the middle of this. It looks like a suburb from, anywhere, the Midwest. It's just,
What are we talking about?
I can never remember. It's the one where the Second Amendment sisters, who are now the whatever, they have their
Is it Londonderry, maybe?
but it's hysterical driving to it, because you're just driving through this suburban neighborhood, all these houses, 50 feet apart, and they're in the middle. There's a gun club, and they do everything there. They shoot machine guns, they blow stuff up, and the neighbors are unhappy, but tough. So
I've actually been out on trails in Londonderry and heard the gun club.
I mean, the general rule to know is that a town can't do anything unless the state gives it permission to do it. So, and you see that all the time when towns will pass things like, oh, you're not allowed to open carry here or concealed carry in town, and they get sued, and the courts always are like, you don't have the power to do that, so you can't do it.
Yes, you need to keep your town leaders in check, right? Because they try to overstep, and they need to have permission in this Billings-Rule state to do anything.
I think the only thing I would add there is, because we live on the Conservancy, we've seen quite a few hunters for the last few weeks out hunting deer, right near our property. You can hear shots ringing out in the morning, so they're out there.
Even in Concord.
Yep. And our neighbors are out practicing all the time. We practice here on our property, but we're by far from downtown.
They're on the other side of the river.
Yeah. People practice in my neighborhood too, but that's not okay. It's a bad thing here.
Manchester,
and not frequently, but
a lot more dense.
Yeah. We did have shots in the neighborhood 2 nights ago. Not practicing. They were. Yeah. So there's my sales pitch for not moving to Manchester. All right, Amy, you said there were more questions.
Yeah, so one question about the weather. It was mentioned that you shouldn't leave the house when it's icy. So do you folks typically keep a stock of food? And if so, for how long? How much do you keep?
I keep, what do I call them? Stuff that I put on the bottom of my boots so I can go out.
Oh, like the spikes?
Spikes, yeah. I mean, they're just, yeah, absolutely. But food, goodness, Amy, it's never been so bad here that we couldn't get to the store within a couple of days. I mean, what sometimes happens is there's an ice storm and half the state doesn't have electricity for a couple of weeks. I have seen that happen since I moved here. It's not a regular event, but it can happen. And then, without electricity, I mean, that's hard. I mean, and the stores are closed too. But I, keep 3 months worth of food and you'd be safe as, for as long as, I think, that'll get you through the winter, right?
Somebody is unmuted that doesn't realize they're unmuted.
Can you mute
I think
everybody?
I'm Oh, yeah. Let me see if I can mute you. There we go. Okay. I think it's harder to mute when you're on a phone. Call in. Yeah, obviously I'm in Manchester, so I have a very different outlook towards food prepping than I did when I lived in Alaska, and could have the similar thing of being without power, ability to get to the store. So here it's a couple days. Something you said, oh,
We always keep a couple weeks of food around that.
It's
know.
just a good practice to
Yeah.
have like 2 weeks worth of food for not having to go to the store in any event. Just any crisis might happen.
Of course, we come
Oh.
from earthquake country, you know, where
generators. That's what I was going to say. Because if you do lose power for a couple weeks and you have 3 months worth of food in your freezer and the weather doesn't stay below freezing the whole time, then very common around here in the rural places to have at least a generator hookup for houses that are for sale. And some of the nicer homes have actual automatic turn on if you lose power propane generators that are fed off the same propane that their furnaces are. So they basically always have the immediate power. So something that's very nice, because New Hampshire is like a state that will get ice and we will lose power. It's very infrequent here in Manchester, but it has happened.
So pro tip, not an option available to everybody I know, but we've only lost power, fortunately, maybe 2 or 3 times in the 7 years we've lived here. But during those times, hotels have generators. We checked into a hotel, had room service and heat and or air conditioning, because one time it was in the summer. So we just went right downtown when we were in Manchester, and we stayed at whatever that was called back then, the big hotel there. And here we stayed at the Exeter Inn when when we lost power here. But it's also never been for more than a few hours overnight, fortunately, in the places we've lived. And I've never been trapped in the house because I couldn't be. I have 3 children and I would lose my mind. So the ice has never been so bad that I wouldn't risk leaving the children for a few hours to go driving on it in the areas I've lived anyway. I'm sure in the more rural areas it gets more dangerous, but.
Of course, another option for losing electricity is being off grid, which we are. So we're not on the electric grid at all. So, you know, we get a little snooty when people lose power. We're like, oh, what's that? But it's just silly. But you can use solar as a backup, and that's another way of handling that too, with batteries, right? Instead of just a cell back or however that works, to actually be able to switch over to your own battery power that will then charge.
Are there more questions for right now, Amy?
Yes, so about the taxes, Constance, this might be more a you question or a Chris question, but he's not here. If rates change or your property increases in value, does your mortgage increase? And so what does that look like? How much lead time do you have to know that that's happening?
Yeah, that if your property taxes go up and your property taxes are part of your payment because they're escrowed, you will have your escrow amount increase. It just happened to me for the building that I live in. It went up about 125 a month. I didn't get a lot of lead time for that. The overall property tax, though, the new assessments came out a few months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, and I believe that they are supposed to announce the new rate for Manchester at any time, and then we'll have the new tax bill. But there has already been calculators online of people like estimating where they think the tax rate is going to be, and you can invest in and see how much it's going to go up. And I believe that I own 2 multifamilies in Manchester, and I believe each of them is going to go up about $1,000. So it's going to be about $100 a month increase. So definitely something we want to avoid and have more people move here. That will keep the budget small, but it's not the kind of increase where the property goes up 200,000 in assessment, and then you immediately have a $600 a month increase on your mortgage. At least I haven't personally seen that. I guess it would depend on each individual town, because each individual, they do the assessments on the 5-year cycle, and you're billed twice a year. But I don't want to act like I know what each individual tax for each town will change, because it very much is town specific here. Anybody want to add to that? Anybody who has?
I've done mortgages. Before I was a chocolate person, I was in mortgages for about 12 years, and I've never seen it get to the point where your mortgage payment is now, astronomically higher. If there's some kind of escrow shortage or anything like that, your payment could go up 100, maybe 200, depending on, even that would be an extreme case in what I've seen in 12 years of doing loans. It's not like you're on the hook for all that extra money right away. You have to send them a check. It's
that's because they always keep the escrow in their favor. So yeah, you're always overpaid in your escrow anyway. Like when you first close on a mortgage, I've noticed that they will take, like insurance for an entire year's policy, plus a few extra months on every closing statement. So they buffer it so that it's not a shock to you, and also it's not coming out of their pockets.
Yeah, it sucks, but it's not usually you're going to be in the poorhouse because of it.
Yeah.
So kind of piggybacking off of the tax question, can you explain current use tax and how that works?
This is what I like to defer to Mark, who's not here tonight. I can explain
about it.
Yeah, okay. I always like to say it's the exact opposite of what you think it would be.
Well, the term is, current use means that currently the public can use it. So we have 210 acres, and we have taken out of current use some number of acres, let's say 5. And the only reason you need to take any acreage out of current use, and you get low property tax rate for the land that you have in current use, right?
Very, very low.
Very, very low. So right, our high taxes are on those 5 acres, let's say. So the 5 acres are really just the developed parts. Anything you're using for farming or agriculture of some sort, you can keep in current use. You don't have to take it out. It's just when you build a structure or a driveway that's considered development. And there's a minimum of 10 acres that you can have in current use. It can't be any less than that. So if you have 10.1 acres, you can take out 0.1 acres and build your house on it. Now, you say no, but I just looked into it.
I
thought it was 11 and 1 acre, and then somebody was like, no, it's 12 and 2 acres. And so I looked it up.
It's 0.1 can be the building envelope.
You'd be hard pressed to really build on that small size, but
and get a well and stick.
But it's not an acre. It's
okay.
That was more my understanding. If you know better, great.
Well, I've always heard the building envelope, but no, I haven't looked it up myself. I've only heard. So if you just looked it up, we will definitely defer to what you looked up. I've also recently learned that you can put things in current use that are under 10 acres if it's like wetlands. I don't know much about it, but I do actually know a parcel of land that could be available that is in current use that's only 6 acres, but it's mostly wetland. So
but can you build on wetlands?
This particular property that I'm talking about has part of it, since it's 6 acres, that is buildable and has already had a septic design approved for the part that was not wetlands. But That's because I saw the plans directly that I know that. And then I think Mark, who's not here tonight, had recently some emails with somebody else who was working to get their non-buildable part of their lot put into current use, because if it's not buildable, it's never going to be developed. Do you know anything more about that, Amy? Or should we leave it at that, as in these are unknowns that we should?
Yeah, the current uses, I think we have a link on the NH relocation guide to the policies surrounding current use. It's kind of a weird thing that New Hampshire has, and there's a lot of variability in what each agent says about it. So I would defer to Mark in this case. So if you have questions about current use, then it's probably best to shoot us an email at info@porcupinerealestate.com, and Mark can answer that for you.
And there's a reason we have due diligence in contracts as well, because it gives you time to find out for sure if what your plans are versus what tax liability you would have by taking part of it out of current use, because then it becomes tax.
Higher tax.
Yeah. But it's also like they want like the makeup tax for that portion. So it's not just your tax rate goes up, it's that you have a big tax bill for taking things out of current use, which kind of segues into this homesteading question anyway, because we are a very rural state. I am making jokes about gunshots in Manchester, but I can be on a large acre farm in 10 to 15-minute drive. So the zoning and the current use taxes have worked to keep New Hampshire very rural, which is also difficult to move people to a state without houses. So that's our current struggle here in New Hampshire. It's very, very low inventory for homes. So I don't think we actually discussed which towns are best, other than in a roundabout way. We've talked about the New Hampshire location and the links off that, and that each town is specific. But even in Manchester, you can have chickens and animals depending on the size of lot you have.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a town. I don't know that there's a town that's best for homesteading or a farm. You can, there are plans for, the 1 acre farm too. You can, whatever you want to do, generally speaking. I mean, you got to figure out the zoning laws, but for that particular town.
Yeah, I guess the best one is one that has available properties if you're new to New Hampshire. How easy, hard is it to start a business in New Hampshire?
Tom, we're waiting for you.
Ready? Oh, I didn't know we were ready.
I'm sorry, I'm like minimizing and maximizing like my things.
No problem. So there's the forming the LLC part for us, which is the same. Basically, anywhere you go, you can choose a different state to form it. We chose New Hampshire because for our purposes, it was friendly enough. And then there's the actual registering it in New Hampshire part, which was also very easy. So you register your trade name right on the state
Secretary of
website.
State site, yeah.
Yep.
Secretary of State, yeah, right.
Yep, Secretary of State. For us, we're a very specific business. We're a food establishment, we're a retail establishment. So anything I speak to is going to be based on that. Here in Exeter, we did a build out of the kitchen. So we did have to get health inspection and the building inspector, both of whom were very easy. Basically, anything we wanted to do, as long as it wasn't like a huge deviation from code, he permitted. Doug is the building inspector in Exeter. He doesn't care about much. The health inspector is pretty easy, surprisingly easy, because we were going by guidelines we found in New Hampshire's health codes and trying to make sure all of our equipment was a certain way. And turned out the health inspector didn't really care much about it. Every year you have to file your annual report, which is about $150, and it's just confirming your contact information, the members of your organization. Nothing crazy there. They don't ask for financials or anything. We specifically are responsible for filing a meals and rental tax every month. That's unique to a business in New Hampshire that has meals or rentals. Not every business has sales tax, so they don't have to file that. But again, that's just an online form every month. It's something we collect from the customers, so it's not like we're paying that. And you get a commission if you file early. Not that that happens very often, because I often forget to file the monthly tax for about 2 months or so. But generally, the state is not very involved in what we're doing here. The town is not very involved in what we're doing. There's the local ordinances and where you can have your sign outside and how many signs you can have in your window. We're in a historic district here, which makes things a little bit more complicated for signage outside and what we're allowed to do out there. But I would say, especially coming from New York, New Hampshire is a very friendly place to start a small business. We have not had any complaints that I can think of. It could be easier. It could be, not getting any permissions for anything and just opening our business and not being monitored at all. But
Maple or honey?
But I would say it's been very favorable, and we've had very little interaction with the state government, very little interaction after we opened with the local government here. But in the beginning, there will be meetings you have to go to get your sign approved or whatever else. You'll have to submit your paperwork, and $150 for this permit and $150 for that permit. But nothing terrible. Bless you, Jody.
Thank you. Not supposed to hear that.
But that's, again, specific to my business. We have another location we opened last year in Portsmouth, which was a little bit more involved with the health department there. Portsmouth is a bit more of a liberal town even than Exeter, which is fairly liberal. So they were a little bit more strict on certain things as far as how many sinks we needed to have, because we're a food business. Even though we don't produce in Portsmouth, we produce here. You need an insane number of sinks. If anybody's opening a food business, you need at least like 6 sinks in order to do your job. It's insane. And then we also had a shop in Newburyport, Massachusetts, which was probably the worst. So avoid Massachusetts. But Exeter has been very easy for us. We haven't, in fact, had a health inspection here because of COVID in the last 2 times they were due. So once a year they inspect. But they've not been coming around because I guess it's an extra person in the kitchen that they don't want. So we have our permit there. It expires in 2023, but they've just been sending it and, hoping that we've been keeping to code, which we have. We're a very clean kitchen. I can show you if you want, but we're a very clean kitchen. But they have been very trusting.
That's actually kind of amusing that they're preventing one person from getting COVID and possibly allowing dirty kitchens, which could be way more dangerous if you didn't have a clean kitchen.
That's government.
Yeah,
But it's not COVID. That's what's important.
yeah. And what about since New Hampshire likes to advertise that we have no income tax? Do you want to speak to income tax as a business owner?
Sure. We are only responsible for federal income tax, since New Hampshire doesn't have a state income tax. It does have business enterprise tax, which is confusing to me. Look it up. Maybe somebody else has better information. Talk to my accountant. They might know better. And it has a business profit tax. We're in our 5th year as a business. We're in our 4th year having a physical location. Prior to that, we were at farmers markets. A profits tax is not something that we've had to worry about in New Hampshire yet. We've not reached that threshold, but because the way the LLC is structured, we did have to pay income tax on the profit, the small amount of profit that we reported on our or K1s and whatever other tax forms are filed. But yeah, you avoid the federal income tax when you're doing your personal taxes here. My wife works from home for her New York City law firm, and we get to avoid the New York City and New York State taxes there. She only pays federal taxes. So if you work from home, some states will allow you to avoid, some states, not all states.
Yeah, I was gonna,
There's a special form you have to file for New York State, but you do avoid them. But in general, it's a very tax-friendly state.
the reason I'm laughing is that because of COVID, Massachusetts has decided that people that are working at home and never setting foot in Massachusetts, but used to, still owe the income tax to Massachusetts. So
I know New York wanted, Cuomo did discuss that, but it never happened, thankfully. And Cuomo is no longer there, so who knows what will happen. But for the past, I would say 5 out of the 7 years that we've been here, Anna has not been paying taxes to New York, and not having to pay them either, which is very nice, because that's high taxes in New York.
I was gonna say that probably offsets a lot of property tax right there.
It does some, yeah. And if we can lower that income threshold on that new save your money for your own kids' education situation, whatever it's called here, the education account, then we could save money on our property taxes even more if we can just lower that income. But Mark's not here for me to complain to about that.
Do you want to talk about that, Jody?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
You don't mean EFAs, do you? That's
What's that?
different. Nothing.
Okay.
EFAs, education
Yeah.
freedom accounts. I mean, that's
I think
just
that is what he's referring to,
That
because
is what I'm referring to.
there's the 300% of
Yes.
poverty cap that they,
correct. Yeah, about 79.5 for a family of 4. That's the cap for getting EFAs.
We're well out of that. I would
Yeah.
like it doubled, please.
Yeah, everybody would. Not everybody, but yeah, the Democrats still want it doubled. But nobody. We're not talking about education right
Yeah.
now.
This is,
No.
so from a business perspective, we've been very lucky. We pay very little in taxes. We have very little involvement with the state.
But there is the tax credit scholarship that if your business donated money to it, you could get an 85% reduction credit on your business, whatever you call it, tax.
The business profits tax or the enterprise tax?
A little of both, I think.
Okay, yeah, one credits to the other two. It's a whole complicated thing. So I advise anybody looking to open a business that they feel will be very profitable to speak to an accountant in New Hampshire, because to me, it's a little complicated, the two taxes and how they work with each other and against each other. But it hasn't affected us yet, so it doesn't matter for us.
so while we were talking, I switched the slide, and I feel like we need to have Ian come back and talk about New Hampshire gun laws. And
You want to talk about gun laws in New Hampshire?
It's open carry.
Open carry, constitution carry.
Yeah.
We've seen people,
Yeah.
because there's hiking trails all around us. We see people all the time that are armed, riding their bicycles, walking through the forest. Like you said, the hunters come through all the time. I've never seen a problem anywhere. From, you know, I'm not out pushing it, but you know, concealed carry is throughout the state, no permit required, constitutional carry.
I mean, yeah, it's in that sense. Constitutional carry would actually be if you're a person who can carry. So it's a little misleading.
Ian's a purist.
Yeah. But yes, we do have, you don't need a permit for concealed carry. We interestingly have a license. You can get a license, but it's optional, which is hysterically funny to me, that a license, which means you're asking permission, you don't really need to do it. It's worth getting if you're going to travel to certain states. like I believe Florida, Indiana, Pennsylvania will accept that. And so if you travel to those states and you want to carry in those states, some people still get it. Sometimes when you buy and sell guns through classified ads, the people selling want to know that you have a carry permit, a carry license, because it means you're a state certified non-criminal. But other than that, yeah, there are still some strange laws about guns in cars and guns on snowmobiles or four-wheelers. And those have to do with the presumption that you're hunting. If you're carrying a gun and you're on one of those vehicles or in a car and it's with you and it's loaded, they'll assume that you're hunting, and that's illegal to do that from a vehicle. So there are still a few strange holdover laws. But for the most part, yeah, it's a really good state to own a gun in.
And you're legally allowed to sell to other people without
Yeah.
going through.
Right, the way the law is written there. So if you're buying from a dealer, you're buying a new gun, getting it from a distributor or getting it from somebody out of state, that has to go through a dealer. And they will, for long guns, that they only contact the federal system. For handguns, you'll fill out a form and they'll contact the state police to get clearance for that. Once you own that gun, you can sell that privately to somebody else. And the way the law is written is if you have no reason to believe that he's prohibited, then you can sell. If you knowingly sell to somebody who shouldn't have a gun, according to the government, a convicted felon, for example, somebody who's had a domestic violence conviction, or somebody who is a user of recreational drugs.
And that's true, sadly.
That is illegal to do. And you can't do straw purchases. You can't go to a dealer and buy a gun for somebody else. Although
That's federal.
That's federal, yeah.
That's federal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really good state to own guns. And nobody, for a while there, people were activists were pushing the whole open carry thing. They were purposely going to bookstores and restaurants and places where you don't often see people with guns, just so that somebody there would call the police. It was a training exercise, actually. Somebody would call the police. The police are obligated to show up. They would show up, and the guys just standing there doing nothing. And eventually the police get the idea. And now I believe that the way it works is, like, if you call 911 or the police or dispatch or something, you say, oh my God, I'm at a place and there's a guy with a gun. They'll say, is he doing anything threatening? Because if he's not, we're not coming. And so people are finally getting that. You see a lot of open carry here.
Yeah, I held up my picture of the school. This is Ward 5 in Manchester. One of our Free State activists wearing open carrying his gun, holding the sign and voting with his gun on at a school.
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole school thing, as I understand it, Congress passed something saying you can't, there are these gun-free zones around schools, and then it got challenged in court and thrown out. And then they passed substantially the same law again. And so I don't think anybody ever enforces it because it'll just get thrown out again. I think it was just a feel-good measure. Technically, you're not supposed to, you can't carry in courthouses. You have to go through a metal detector to go through those. There are other places where you're not allowed to carry.
Post office?
Huh?
Post office.
Right, post office is federal. Although, again, this is one of those things, I don't think people challenge it much, and they don't really care too much here. That it really, if you look at what it says about not doing it, it says you can't carry it in for any unlawful purpose and lawful purpose. So, if you're in California, maybe it's not a lawful purpose and they could push it. Here, I don't think anybody seems to care.
How about the State House?
No, you can carry guns in the State House. I've done that. I've gone to hearings. I've been in the.
You've testified.
I've testified, and I have a gun on. It's usually concealed, but no, you can just walk in there and
I'm sure some of our state reps do every day.
And then there was a whole big thing where when Republicans took control of the House, they made one of the House rules saying it was fine to carry on the floor. Then Democrats took over the House and they passed a rule saying it wasn't okay. But here's the thing, they can't search anybody on the way in. They can't make the members go through metal detectors or anything. So it was totally just a useless exercise. And a bunch of the Republicans just openly said, look, I'm carrying a gun in there, do something about it. And they never did anything about it. So yeah, people, state reps are always, I mean, there's always a bunch of them down there carrying. And people in the galleries are carrying. Everywhere you go here, there's people with guns, which is really nice.
All right. And then the next, I think we covered that we're very gun friendly here. Business laws.
So does Amy have any?
What? Oh, about the gun laws? No, she's
No more questions related to gun laws, no.
Thank you.
business laws we've kind of covered, and then landlord laws are, I would refer to them as balanced here. I actually looked this up recently. I am a landlord, and the New Hampshire fell kind of in the middle of the pack for where they range the 50 states as far as landlord laws. And I've had no need to actually file an eviction. I have had tenants move out, and I've had a little bit of flexibility in letting them move out, but I haven't had any experience, especially during COVID, of actually, I mean, I've asked a tenant to move out and he did not push back and try to use COVID as a reason to stay. So I don't have a lot of experience with, sorry, my dog has decided she needs to be something. She needs something. But that is like talking to other landlords, and I've sold a lot of multifamilies. I do think we have a very balanced tenant. Like some states, tenants have so many rights that investing there is just, in my opinion, would be extremely risky. I've heard stories about Massachusetts, we're just across the border, that are like, yeah, I don't think I'd want to own rental properties there. But here, with proper notice, the tenants don't get to think they own your property just because they live there. So anybody else on the panel, landlord, have anything to say about that? Yeah.
I guess we're kind of like a landlord, but that was just because of the prior owners are in the 1-bedroom unit that's attached to the house, because they're waiting for somebody to move, who's waiting for somebody to move, but they're going to actually be out at the beginning of December. And since they had actually had tenants before, they wrote up the contract for us. And it's just been pretty easy.
Cool. We haven't had to evict them.
No.
I mean, I wouldn't know what the law sort of like, although I do feel much more comfortable being a landlord here than in California, where I knew I had almost no rights as a landlord.
Yeah, I don't necessarily trust news articles, but when I see that like people close and expect to rent back, and then the previous owner doesn't move for 2 years in California, won't let the new buyers evict the previous sellers. So that makes me very glad that I live in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the strong sellers market, we are having more sellers who are asking for rent backs, and buyers are needing to be a lot more flexible with their take possession days than we would ever have recommended in the past. So, Amy, any other questions?
Not related to that slide.
Oh, no, just in general.
Lots of questions in general, but we can finish up this slide and then go to those.
Oh, look at that. We have, yep. Where are all the porks? Who wants to talk about this one?
Not here.
You said not?
Not in Exeter.
Okay.
You got some.
We have some, very few relative to Manchester or in Portsmouth.
Right. We have a lot in the Upper Valley. They're often hidden, but we have a growing community here, even in Croydon alone, but definitely the surrounding area. And again, with respect to the size of the town, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's one of the places. We have Bardo Farm, and we have a monthly potluck where we get new movers and people looking at properties, coming to our potlucks, as well as, you know, the old timers and so on. So that's one place. I don't think we have representation from everywhere. You know, the largest, I mean, so like Croydon probably has a high per capita pork population, but you know, nothing compared to what Manchester has, right? But that's just because it's rural. It's a good place to start. You rent and then you take your time, look around the state, you get to know people locally. There's a pork club there that has new movers once a month and different activities. So it's really easy to meet people there. And then you sort of have a cohort and, you know, from when you move. And then you find where you really want to live and, you know, take your time, look around the state. I've known a number of people to do that. Seacoast has a lot of porks there. There's a good representation there, but they're spread around. I mean, Tom, maybe you can talk about that a little more.
Yeah, the Seacoast has two, like, I don't know what we call them, but like clubhouses of welcoming Seacoast and doing events for people who, porks who might live on the Seacoast. And generally, there's one in Dover. There's, I don't know where the other one just opened, but where was it?
Rollinsford.
Rollinsford. In each town, I would say it's not such a high per capita number of porks, but on the whole, there's a nice community here, and we try to organize events. There's Thanksgiving things and markets, the free, whatever we're calling them, the weekend markets that they do.
Yeah, market days, I call them. Yeah.
So it's a nice community, and it's we're only about 15 minutes from the Prax here, where they do those market days for the Seacoast. So we have felt, you know, the presence of other porks, and we're able to interact with them. And they come into my shop here. We accept Bitcoin and all kinds of cryptos here, and a lot of places in Portsmouth do, thanks to the work of a couple of Free Staters who were living there for a while. So it is a nice community. It's not as densely populated as Manchester, but it is a nice community here. Very family oriented too on the Seacoast for porcupine community.
Yeah, the
Family oriented. Sorry, Constance. Go ahead.
The Proxium has a lot of homeschool families that meet there.
Yeah.
They've made that their central thing, is to focus on homeschooling at the Praxium, and that's in Dover. Upper Valley also is very family oriented. I have to say, lots of young families, young kids, growing homeschool community. And they just get, I mean, of all ages, from 2 to 18, practically, doing all sorts of things. And then, of course, we have North Country. I'm just going to keep going here, Constance. North Country has an amazing number of porcupines up there. And people just really like it. There's lovely towns. You know, it's not hard to get things, you know, you're not like so far away from anything up there. And people just like the beautiful white mountains and, you know, all the
Berlin is the only place, I'd say, in New Hampshire that the prices compare to some of the Midwest cities. And there's a Walmart there. And if you can work from home, they have high-speed internet. So Berlin is a nice, like, it's building a community because of its affordability.
Yeah, it's a good point. They are far from, you know, us, and I'm far from Manchester. I mean, we're not that far. I'm an hour from Manchester, and we do get down there regularly. And we get visits from North Country people regularly, and we go up there and so on. And then there's lakes, right? So that's the other region, I think. And, you know, it's funny there. Oh, Monadnock. Okay, so you go ahead, talk about that.
Oh, well, I was just, those are the other regions. We don't have everybody represented, but Monadnock has Keene, and I spend a lot of time there as a realtor because the properties are more affordable, more homesteady. Just was in Swansea, Keene, and Chesterfield over the weekend. It's beautiful. Lots of outdoor activities there, and we definitely have a growing pork presence there. And the same with the lakes. There's a lot of people. I mean, people have been steadily moving in for a lot of years. And so whatever region you land in, you will find like-minded people, or you will find porks, but you will also find like-minded natives. So that's the, go beyond the porks or the Free Staters that have moved here. And if you're passionate about a project, volunteer, you will meet people, and we can grow the community, because every month I meet somebody new who says, hey, I had no idea you guys were here. Like, I've felt like this my whole life, and now I just found out you guys are here, and I'm so excited. And they become super active at events and in politics and such.
I mean, even they don't even necessarily get involved. They get excited. They like that we're moving here. But what you need to know is, like, most people who live in the rural parts of New Hampshire, and I have to say it that way, they are like-minded. They don't necessarily know the term libertarian or liberty-minded, but you talk to them about the issues and they agree with you. So they're just good neighbors, and they're just good to have, and they make it really fun to live, at least where I live, because they are like-minded. So yeah.
I think that's been most of the experience too. We've I think everybody we've met, for the most part, within the Free State Project and without, are liberty-minded people. Across. I'm not saying that everybody is. I don't want to
They're
completely
not.
whitewash the whole thing, but the fact is, almost everybody that we've met randomly at the mall or on the trail or wherever is liberty-minded, and willing to have a real discussion, and not call you names. That's the one thing I hated about being in California, was being called names for having a defensible position, and believing in freedom. And I don't see that here. You can have a good discussion with almost anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible to move here and live in a bubble, and it's also, when you go outside that bubble, you find out that your bubble might be bigger than you, or you might be keeping yourself too bubbled when you don't need to, because you might be able to have conversations with the grocery store clerk and everything goes fine. Amy says we have a lot of questions, so we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to do, I guess, a speed round for our last 10 minutes, because we have about one question per minute, it seems, from what you've said, right?
Okay, so here we go. Somebody is concerned about New Hampshire turning blue because of the influx of people from the surrounding states. What are your thoughts on that?
We have to get people here first.
Move here, participate, and vote. That's how we keep the state free. That's the plan of the Free State Project, is to bring people here and become politically active.
I will say, I had an open house over the last weekend, not this weekend, the weekend before. Most of my potential buyers were from Massachusetts, and I had a funny story where a guy was like, oh, this isn't enough land because I want to shoot a bow and arrow. And he just kind of looked at me, and I was like, okay. And he's like, and guns. And I'm like, okay. So I think the people coming from Massachusetts are coming for the same reasons that a lot of the Free Staters are.
Yep, and New York State, I would add, and Vermont. I mean, the surrounding states, Maine, absolutely.
And California.
And California. But they did ask about the surrounding states. New Jersey too, right? I mean, they're
Washington State, even Oregon. Like this year is just lots of Washington State this year. All right, next question.
Okay, So is it true that Manchester has the highest absolute density of porcupines and Keene has the highest per capita?
I don't know. Anybody know? I
Hmm.
would say Manchester for sure has the highest, but we also have the highest amount of muggles. So I don't know what our per capita.
Okay.
I
What's
think
the
Britain has the most per capita. Go on.
what's the renting situation like? How easy is it to find rentals and such?
It's under 1% vacancy in Manchester. And Manchester has the most rentals of the state. Other than available rentals, there might be more in Berlin, but that would be outside of my market. So I wouldn't know. Anybody on the panel
Claremont.
want to speak to Claremont? Yeah. Claremont would probably
Claremont,
have a good.
Newport, those are good rental towns. I don't know what their availability is, but you know, in terms of finding rental.
Yeah, I frequently skip talking about Claremont because I make a face. Rochester actually might have a decent amount of rentals as well.
I'll make a face
But-
about Rochester, but okay.
Yeah, same. But all these towns are trending up and their vacancies have dropped. It's just that there was a large period of time where there were nobody to rent the places, so they fell into disrepair. And so a lot of that housing for rentals is not ideal.
Okay, next question. So does anyone do any sort of education for things like how to use your land for people who might want to farm or do some sort of agriculture? It's probably more Jody's area.
I mean, we used to do workshops all the time. We are very well, so we have a farm, we have a pig farm, we raise all sorts of animals, really. I mean, we breed pigs, we have cows, we have chickens, turkeys. We've had a bunch of different kinds of animals over the years, emus, rabbits. And I'm probably forgetting something. We welcome people to come, you know, shadow us and learn from what we do, you know, process the meat. We don't do the butchering or anything, although some people do have the skills. You know, we are off grid. We're happy to give you a tour, show you, you know, our battery setup, our solar setup. So I'd say we're just totally open to having conversations with people at the very least.
And there was somebody recently who had a workshop in Henniger who, like, they killed, butchered, prepped their own chicken as part of the workshop. Like, it was like an overnight camping, cook your own food. So if you network and ask the questions, you will find people who will share their skills.
Okay, next question. We have some single folks here attending and they're wondering, so the first question is Manchester or Keene if you're single and in your 20s?
Why not
Male or
both?
female?
just go back and forth.
I don't know how they identify.
Go to the shell,
Go to
and
the
then
clubs. Yeah.
go to the clubs. Yeah. Don't forget that you can also talk to people about their values and find out that they haven't been exposed to the ideas of liberty. And once you start talking to them, you might not actually need to date a libertarian to find a good match. You might just find a person who doesn't want to hurt other people and then start having conversations.
Awesome. And then, so for folks who might be looking for a partner, how is New Hampshire?
Man,
I
we're
don't
all
think we have the right
married
panel
or
for that.
committed, right? No idea.
I did see somebody was working on a dating app. Oh,
I saw that too on the Free State Project group. Yeah.
yeah. This is probably not the right panel for that question, but yeah, it's pretty much the same answer that I've already given.
Okay.
I mean, I can lecture, like, but I don't think that's what we're here for.
And then this might not be necessarily appropriate for this forum, but if anybody has any resources on where to point this person. So they said that they understand that marijuana is decriminalized but not legalized. So what are the implications of possession or growing a plant under those conditions? And this is being recorded.
Yeah, let's talk about that one later.
So for the person who asked that question, you can email Constance at porcupinerealestate.com.
I don't mind just adding real quick, if you live close enough and you're 15 minutes away is Amesbury and Salisbury, Massachusetts, both of which have an alternative therapies group where you can buy adult use products from, it doesn't matter if you live there or not. And that may or may not be where I get mine from.
I would say that Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts are all legal states. It's a matter of time for New Hampshire. It's amazing to me that we haven't passed more friendly, and I'm forgetting the terms at the moment. When I lived in Alaska, you could have 4 ounces for personal use without issue, and now there's dispensaries, and it's pretty cool. And hopefully, even though I don't necessarily agree with the idea of legalize and tax it, because yeah, I definitely want nobody harmed from using a plant. So
You can own property in
Any
Maine
more?
too, you know, people who have done that, right? And then just grow there, like that's legal.
We have one more question, and that is, what are the various areas like in terms of how the people are? So can you all talk about like friendliness, acceptance, welcoming, that kind of thing?
Let me tell you this. We came, the first thing we had to do when we got here was get our driver's license.
Mhm.
We went to the state office to get the driver's license. First of all, the line, there was 2 people in front of us. And by the time we got our paperwork, we got to the counter, we were the first in line. It still took an hour because that's how long it takes to do that stuff. Because they got to type stuff in the computer. They're the most friendly people, liberty-minded people sitting behind the desk. We had a great conversation. We went to the city office to do the other half of the registration. Again, very friendly people. No, like we were looking for a place to park. We parked right in front. We went inside, and very friendly people. I don't think we met anybody here in Concord that wasn't friendly in one way or another. It's been very friendly, and that's in or outside of the Free State.
Yes, I have to say that we say hello to somebody and they answer back, unlike in California where they just ignore you and keep walking.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think
everybody's friendly here.
I think that we need an entire time to and have all the regions represented, and but there are slight differences in the regions for sure, but overall none of them that I would discount for anyone, which is kind of the problem as a realtor. Like I can't be like, oh no, you definitely don't want to live in that region, because as I drive around, I'm like, I could live here. I could live here. This one's good. I like this. So
Yeah.
anything to add, Tom? Any
Yeah,
last questions, Amy?
Coming from New York, everybody's very friendly here.
Yes.
No other questions, but if anyone does have questions that you think about after this, feel free to email us. You can reach Constance at porcupinerealestate.com. You can reach me at amy@porcupinerealestate.com. And if you can't remember any of those, you can always send an email to info@porcupinerealestate.com.
Or you can go to porcupinerealestate.com and find the email addresses. All right, well, thank you everyone. Hopefully we've answered a lot of questions, and you will all be, if not already here in New Hampshire, moving here as soon as you can, because it's awesome. And thanks